2 strikes, the pitch. Hey, Cubs win the division! Cubs win the division! Cubs win the division! Look at that scene on the field.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the one and only Harry Carey.
Thank you, Gary. You all know, thank you. You all know what we're here for, the 7th inning stretch. I know you've been here, you're here from all over the country. There's a chance for them to hear you back home. We're going to sing it, and sing it good and loud, especially loud. A 1, a 2, a 3. Take me out to the ball game.
On April 15th, Tax Day in the U.S., the Monday Morning Quarterback, coming to you from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Boston Red here in the Jerry Pippin broadcast book. We remember Jerry Pippin every Monday morning, a legendary broadcaster in his own right. He passed in We'll start off with some polling. We also have E.J. Dion. The Tiger is back. He won the Masters on Sunday. And we have the National Hockey League and now the NBA starting off their legendary long march to the playoffs. And this is only mid-April. And that will go on through May and possibly for some of them on to early June. If you recall the O.J. chase back in 1994. They were chasing O.J. down the freeways of L.A. in June. So on we go. We'll start off with some polling just to get an idea of what is going on here with the morning call. Actually, we'll start with Gallup first. This is on Friday the 12th. So we can get a benchmark here. Post-Mueller report is the headline here. DJ Trump's approval rating back at 45. DJ Trump's approval rating increased relatively sharply over the past month to 45 in the April 1st through 9th Gallup poll. That is up from 39, 6 points in March. This marks the third time number 45 has received a 45% job approval rating in the Gallup trends, his highest in the series. Very, very unusual. Gallup's first measurement of the presidential approval since the special counsel Mueller completed his report into Russian attempts to sway the outcome of the 2016 election. The Attorney General Barr's synopsis of Mueller's findings reported no Russian involvement in the Trump campaign and insufficient evidence of obstruction of justice, which ODJ claim vindicated him. Congress has raised questions about the Attorney General's synopsis of Mueller's finding and is demanding to see the report, which is supposed to come later this month. While this plays out, Americans are slightly more approving of DJ Trump than they were before the report was delivered, although a small majority, 51%, still disapprove of the president. Trump's previous 45 readings were recorded in his first week in office. That was his election bounce, not much of an election bounce, in January of 2017, and again in June of 2018 after the historic meeting with the Korean leader, Chairman The president's improved ratings is a result of small increase amongst independents and Democrats, whose rating of the president have increased by 6 and 4 percentage points respectively. Republican approval of the president remains unchanged, with about 9 in 10 Republicans approving of Trump's performance. It's very interesting that some Democrats are approving of DJ Trump, but they are the independents 6 percentage points. We watch them very, very closely here as to where they are. Now let's go to the morning call. We usually don't start out with the polling. We decided we would today. This is in the state of Pennsylvania. Lunchbox Joe Biden, early top pick for Pennsylvania Democrats. That is the Muhlenberg college poll and the morning call. With a year to go before the primaries, voters weighed in on which Democrat should be the presidential nominee. 28% selected Joe Lunchbox Biden when asked why which Democrat they would select in 2020. Vermont, Bernie Sanders had 16%. Two candidates, Elizabeth Warren in Massachusetts and Kamala Harris of California, followed with 8% each. The South Bend Mayor Buttigieg drew support from 4%. He announced his presidential campaign in South Bend, Indiana, on a Sunday. Up to that point, Buttigieg had about 4 or 5% in the polls with an exploratory committee. The latest poll results in Pennsylvania signals that Biden is the early leader, even if he's not formally in. That is from Chris Borick, a political science professor and poster at Muhlenberg, and I hope I'm pronouncing that, College's Institute of Public Opinion, which conducted the poll. Now, this is a small poll of 405 registered Democrats. The poll, which has a margin of error, and a high margin of error here, also 5.5%. I don't think we've had one this year that we've actually had 5.5%. Now, it's a possibility we have. I don't think we have had this happen before. Views from left and right. The poll carries across ideological differences within the party. Biden's poll strongest amongst conservative and moderate Democrats, did well amongst all but the party's most liberal bloc of voters who preferred Bernie or Senator Warren. This is a very high level of comfort with him amongst the Democrat electorate. That is an enormous advantage. The former vice president has significant ties. Of course, the state is born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And so did Hillary the Monster Clinton in the Senate for more than 30 years. Asked about Sanders, who was in Bethlehem, on Monday for a town meeting event, who will be, by Fox News. 17% say they were excited to vote for him. 42% said they would be comfortable 30% said they would not be comfortable voting for Bernie Sanders. Elizabeth Warren and Harris drew similar levels of enthusiasm. 37% would be comfortable voting for Warren, 24% would be uncomfortable, 14% would be excited, while Harris, 35% for her would be comfortable, 28% uncomfortable, 12% excited. Beto O'Rourke, Beto, who stopped in Pennsylvania during the first week of his campaign, he was at the Penn State main campus, drew the most divided response from voters. 10% would be excited to vote for him, but just as many say they would be comfortable voting for him as they would be uncomfortable, 31% of each. No hurry to pick is one thing they got from the polls. The main focus will be preventing DJ Trump from winning a second term. A majority, 55%, vowed to vote for the Democrat they see as the best able to defeat DJ Trump. Healthcare concerns, healthcare polls respondents that showed a strong support for various proposals to expand healthcare coverage to more Americans, including healthcare for all. Offering an optional government plan, such as allowing people to buy coverage through Medicare, but keeping private insurance if they choose, drew support from 91% of the respondents. And we close it with capitalism or socialism, and that is usually a question that is weighted when a pollster asks you to choose between the two. Republicans already have started to attack Democrats by labeling them socialists. Leaning into the recent success of Democratic Socialist candidates' policy shifts to the left, asked their views of socialism and capitalism. Both faced positively amongst Democrats. 45% had a somewhat very positive view of socialism. 49% said the same for capitalism. Ideas like single payer coverage have been a newly prominent advocates, but Bernie Sanders has been talking about this since the 90s, like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But the view that the government should play a role in providing a social safety net is not new for the Democratic Party. Boric, a lot of things are long-term pieces of Democratic electorate views since the New Deal, and that is correct about that. So that is that particular poll. And what else do we have here? This is from Real Clear. They mentioned a number of polls, and the infamous Rasmussen had a poll on matching up Bernie Sanders and DJ Trump. DJ Trump at 47, Bernie at 44. I've seen various polls out here. And they also had, this is Rasmussen, Bernie at, DJ Trump at 49 on his approval, 50 disapproval. Is the only one you're going to find of that particular situation coming out. And on Thursday, there was another poll from Monmouth University and St. Ansel. That's the New Hampshire primary there. They had Biden at 23, Bernie at 16. Pretty much about the same. Harris at 7, Warren at 8, Beto O'Rourke at 6, Buttigieg at 11. This was in tiny New Hampshire. Twitter King Booker at 4, Amy Klobuchar at 2, Gillibrand at 1, and also Gabon at 1 also there. Now in Iowa, there's a higher rating there for Joe Biden. Of course, he's ran 2 times as vice president in Iowa. Then Bernie at 16, Elizabeth at 17, Harris at 7. Harris at 7. And Buttigieg at 9, and Beto O'Rourke at 6, Cory Booker at 3, Amy Klobuchar at 4. This is a state she has to do well in. So those are some of the latest polls from that part of it. Let me just do a little skipping around here, and we'll get to we'll talk about the establishment Democrats and how they would like to shut out progressives. Let's go over here, and we'll start this story here. Bernie Sanders accused liberal think tanks of smearing progressive candidates. This is the old battle, a very historic battle. It goes back to Marx and Engels, the battle of progressives slash socialists against right-wing social democrats. Nothing is new here. Excuse me. This is from the New York Times. Vogel and Ember, Sidney Ember and Kenneth Vogel. Senator Sanders, in a rare and a forceful rebuff by a presidential candidate of influence party ally, has accused a liberal think tank of undermining Democrats' chance of taking back the White House in 2020 by using this resource to smear him and other contenders pushing progressive policies. Mr. Sanders' criticism of the Center for American Progress, remember that is where John Podesta hung around, delivered on Saturday a letter obtained by the Times, reflects a semi-ideological battle within the Democratic Party that threatens to reopen wounds of 2016. The letter had criticism shared amongst his supporters that the think tank had close ties to Hillary and Monster Clinton and the establishment of the Democratic Party. This is counterproductive. Negative campaign needs to stop, Bernie wrote to the board of the Center for American Progress and its sister group, the Center for American Progress Action Fund. The Democratic primary must be a campaign of ideas, not of bad faith or smears. Please help play a constructive role in efforts to defeat DJ Trump. Sanders said the letter after a website ran by the Action Fund, I think Progressive, suggested that his attacks on the income inequality were hypocritical in the light of his growing personal wealth. The letter is tantamount to a warning, a shot to Democratic establishment, but Sanders, who continues to criticize the party insiders on the campaign trail, will not be complacent. A repeat of 2016, when he and his supporters believed party leaders and allies worked to deny him the nomination, the party's nomination, which they did, actively doing that. Democratic Party leaders worked to heal the wounds, supposedly, and to avoid a recurrence in 2020, in part by overhauling party rules. We've talked about that before. That's what the superdelegates, specifically, they've engaged in extensive outreach to Bernie's base, who've come to distrust party leaders, and for very good reasons. Some view that the Center for American Progress and its leader there, Neera Tandem, as part of that cabal working to stymie liberal activities and ideas, actually should be progressive. We'll have to correct some things here. The center known as CAP was founded in 2003 by John Podesta. Now he's a Clinton lackey. The group hosts forums featuring Democratic officials and candidates, including Bernie, while its Action Fund wages political advocacy on the campaign trail, targeting Republicans but also targeting progressives. both Podesta, who was chair of Clinton's 2016 campaign, and his tandem, who advised it, were mentioned as candidates for White House Chief of Staff had Clinton won the race, but they didn't make it. Tandem email Sunday morning deferred comments to the editor-in-chief of Think Progressive. So this is only part of the fight. Bernie accused Think Progressive of personal attacks on two other Democratic presidential candidates who have espoused progressive policies, Twitter King Booker of New Jersey and Senator Warren of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He cited a February post on the site accusing Booker of undermining a bill he wrote with Sanders that would have allowed the importation of medications from Canada and other countries. Mr. Sanders further accused Think Progressive of playing into Trump's hand by publishing op-eds, criticizing Elizabeth Warren for claiming to be a Native American Aboriginal. So this is part of this playing out here, no doubt about it. As campaigns events across the country, many supporters of Bernie still express frustration with the outcome of 2016. Now, what this goes is to the age-old question in a party or any political campaign. If there is a number of voters, a segment of voters, I should say, within that particular party, and there's another segment to the establishment of the party that opposes them, it immediately tells those people that are opposed and those people that are demigrated that they do not want their votes. Now, the stratagem is, if you don't need their votes, you can say anything about them that you want to say. If you feel you need their votes, then you should walk on eggshells. And evidently this operation has not learned anything. But they see the progressive candidates as threats, therefore they should do as much as they can to dirty up the water. Well, dirtying up the water now is totally different. What's happening there is these are the old campaign tactics that were used primarily before social media. Now what happens is that they try to do the same, the most vicious racist attacks against Barack Obama in 2008 did not work, backfired on them. Hillary the Monster Clinton was defeated, and Barack Obama rode Mr. Lincoln's train from Philadelphia on to Washington, D.C. Hillary Clinton went to her home. She had two homes at the time, so I'm not sure which home she went to. Anyway, nonetheless, that does happen in this environment. It's a very unfortunate situation, but they are still out spreading rumors. A person told me, I think a few weeks back, about Bernie Sanders and how Bernie Sanders' ego was driving him. He didn't talk about money, but ego, etc. This is the old lie that they've been pushing a long time. The problem is you don't try to push something such as that to Bernie supporters that are committed. You're not going to change their mind. What this basically says is that these individuals assume that they are a bit more clever. Well, perhaps they are, but it doesn't exactly equate to support for their candidate in a situation that they're going to need as much support as possible. As Bernie was in, he was several places in Warren, Michigan on Saturday. He was, let me see, where was he on Sunday? Bernie was in Madison. He was in Warren, Michigan. They moved on. And he was in Pennsylvania. Anyway, let me jump back here and find Well, we'll do this in between. There are two of these articles here. This is from the Washington Post. Can Bernie Sanders really win over Trump voters? The answer to that is yes. This is in Madison, Wisconsin. Walked on stage Friday under a gray sky. It was cold air. It was snow. This was at the University of Wisconsin. Labeling DJ Trump a pathological liar. That's become part of the stump speech of Bernie Sanders. And he repeated at a Union Hall in Michigan, moving around and on to a park that was in Pennsylvania. That was in Pittsburgh. The biggest liar. He was going on to stand up for working families and take on the establishment. This is Bernie Sanders of DJ Trump. Striking example, this strategy will play out Monday night when Bernie appears at a town hall meeting hosted by the Fox News channel, an outlet many Democrats detest, no doubt about that. Bernie faces a significant, this is the Washington Post here, in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, where many working class voters, European voters, were drawn to Trump. Populist message in 2016. But many Democrats across the country are unconvinced, even while they increasingly fear Sanders has a real shot at the nomination, given his solid base support and deep fractured Democratic field, which includes now 20 candidates. Some are worried that a national ticket led by a Bernie Sanders type Democrat who wants a transformed government will alienate the political center. They are always worried about that. If Sanders wins the nomination, Trump will be president again. This is according to Kurt Schroeder, the Democrat from Oregon. He would guarantee that. Many Democrats' gains in 2012 were made by candidates who were not in the Sanders mold, no doubt about that. Some Democrats say a similar model is a path to victory in 2020. In Wisconsin, Michigan, Democrats nominated more traditional candidates for governor. Well, Wisconsin's a little bit different there. The Democratic Party, for many, many years, had been ran by, when they were in power, before Boss Walker ascended, were ran by these so-called moderate Democrats. I remember, what was his name now? I'll even pick up later. But that's what sets up easy segues, or easy trade-offs for Republicans like Boss Walker. And old Boss was there 8 years. Divide over Sanders reflects a dilemma at the heart of the Democratic primary. Should the parties nominate a Democratic version of Trump who can match his combativeness and energizing liberals and take the fight to the president, or should it embrace a consensus builder? Well, consensus builders don't do very well amongst with people like DJ Trump. Hillary Clinton tried that, but also there were other factors there. Trump castigates Bernie as Crazy Bernie for opposing skimpy health care policies backed by DJ Trump. Crazy Bernie and his band of congressional Democrats would outlaw these plans. He calls it disasters in 7th grade, a tirade. This all sets an intriguing backdrop for Bernie appearance on Fox News. He has a good relation with some of his hosts. Bernie appeared on Fox to tell its viewers the president is a pathological liar. Since Bernie's Midwestern rallies in recent days have not attracted the same massive crowds as during his kickoff events in New York and Chicago earlier, the audiences have shown some signs of animosity towards current and former rivals. The next phase of Sanders' campaign, officials say, will be focused on activating its voluntary army of more than 1 million. They need 2 million and 0.5 that he is electable. The campaign manager there, Sharku, described this phase as continuing to address what I think is one of the most critical questions in the race, that is the best candidate to defeat DJ Trump. Sanders supporters say voters are deeply frustrated and are looking for a leader. There's no doubt about that. And you have to look even at this article from the corporate media. I was looking at some of Bernie's rallies in some of the places that he went to. The numbers are fairly consistent. In Pittsburgh, a very large rally. And at the University of Wisconsin, it was very, very cold, but it looked to be in pretty good shape. But many Democratic leaders are watching Sanders with concern, believing that the best bet for beating DJ Trump is a less hostile message with a more moderate message there. And I don't think anybody for basic I don't think anyone's for basic socialism. I really don't. That's Senator Joe Manchin in West Virginia. Of course, he was reelected, and he is there throughout whatever happens in the national race. Doug Jones, who faces re-election in Ruby Red State, that's in Alabama, said his constituents want a consensus bill at the top of the ticket. Speaking for North Carolina, if Americans have a choice between a self-avowed socialist Democrat and a free market capitalist, he loses. That is from Thor Tillis. He's in North Carolina. When Sanders unveiled his Medicare for All plan, he had 13 co-sponsors, including 4 of his rivals. Kristen Gillibrand appeared at a news conference with Bernie, which we congratulate her on that. Haven't heard as much about her, but as LBJ would say, she is on her way. And this is from E.J. Dion here. We have to get E.J. in. It would save Pixels, ink, and talking time if we all agreed on the obvious. Democrats are more divided than Republicans and will remain so for the foreseeable future. What matters is everything else. You once said this is reality is knowledge. First, the facts. Democrats are more diverse than Republicans in almost every intangible way. Or imaginable way, sorry about that, racially, ethnically, religiously, and ideologically. And Democrats' diversity is increasing because of the flood of new supporters of fleeing DJ Trump. Many of these newcomers are not registered Democrats, meaning they wouldn't vote in most 2020 primaries. But their ballots help Democrats win control of the House. As for the Republicans, they are overwhelmingly a party of Europeans and Christians. They tilt male, especially in their leadership. Among women in the House, 89 are Democrats and only 13 are Republicans. The GOP is a party of older people. The Democrats are a party of younger people, partially because of the racial and ethnic heterogeneity of the rising generation. The 2018 House race, according to exit polls, Republicans won 50% of those 45 and older, but only 36% of those under 45, and just 32% of those 30 and under. The data points explain a very large share of the standard political commentary. The question rises again about Republican politicians is why don't you have the courage to speak out against the president who many times a day violates the most basic norms of decency, values of many of the same politicians lauded before the 8th of November 2016. The question regularly asked about Democrats is why do they fight each other so much, including single-payer health care, the Green New Deal. The Republican question is easier to dispose of. The GOP has been working hard for half a century to become monocultural, and mono-ideological. Trump has accelerated the process. Most are happy to bring off with judges and tax cuts. And please, no elite that this is about those Trump blue-collar folk. The Atlantic's Ron Brownstein, he's a political commentator, been around a long time, pointed out using Quinnipiac University's polling from last year, 76% of European Republicans without a college degree supported Trump, but so did 71% of European Republicans who did have a college degree. And this is very important here because, again, the corporate press mislabels the Trump supporters as being low-class people without high school diplomas living in trailer parks. Not true at all. There is a better chance of a Massachusetts politician coming out as a Yankee fan than as a Republican elected official turning on DJ Trump. Of course, there's economic reasons for that. Democrats love to say that diversity is strength. Well, sure, if they are coalescing as it is and clicking, it can amass a lot of votes. 9.7 million more than the Republicans last year in House races, while many of them disagree on tactics. Impeachment now, later. You haven't heard the word impeachment in the last few weeks. They agree on other objectives too, such as getting everyone health care and acting decisively on climate change and reducing economic inequalities. But on these questions too, there is a wide divergence of how. That always is the case. These differences won't be wished away, as Gallup reported in January. 51% of Democrats see themselves as liberal, 34% see themselves as moderate, 13% as conservative. Well, those people, some of them have shifted over to DJ Trump. And yes, if the House Democratic Caucus is contentious, consider that 31 of the 235 members represent districts that DJ Trump carried in the overlapping group of 41 seats holders that went Republican in 2016. There is no way this crowd can prevail if studies of one of the most boring words in politics, forbearance. Some forbearance, excuses, goals are the litmus test, not the means test. The left is right, but is right to be frustrated over the excessive caution of early Democratic administrations. But moderates aren't sellouts for asking what the traffic of public opinion will bear. As Republicans, they need to lean the opposite of forbearance when it comes to Trump. Probably lean. Anyway, they should look at those demographic numbers and how decades do they think, how many decades they think it will take to dig out the wreckage of this president will leave in his wake. Well, part of the problem is that the changing of the nation, at least on the surface, is accomplished much quicker in the last, we'll say, 10 years, particularly after the Depression and before the Depression, than it has in the past. Part of it is change in demographics, technological change. Now, the tax cut, that is old hat politics we call pump priming. And it was a colossal tax cut. So it gave some zap, whichever one you want, to the economy. But at the same time, that adds to the so-called deficit, which you don't hear much about. But that in itself is not particularly a negative thing. However, the problem is with the tariffs coming, those kinds of things. Yes, tariffs do create jobs, but at the same time they lose jobs. Particularly if you're banking on a very tenuous sector of the economy, such as manufacturing. Manufacturing is one sector of the economy that does follow some basics. In other words, you have supply and demand. You can only manufacture something if there is a demand out there. And your domestic demand is normally very limited. So you have to go globally. And that in itself is very tricky, not straightforward at all. America first. There's been more problems than not. And then, as Bernie said on yesterday in Pittsburgh, and he was also, before that, he was in Lordstown, Ohio, that the GM plant there is closing, and several GM plants have closed. And they moved that work to Mexico. Well, those things will continue to happen, and very little can be done about them. Let me just check on our time here. We got EJ in. We'll do one more story. Incidentally, we still have the infamous open source report to finish up. We started working on it anew. We'll get that out in the next few days. And we've been saying that over 2 months now. We did get Numbers Man on the weekend. You can find that at WBRN at bostonred.org, the Boston Red Network. You can find the player there. It's on iHeart, it's on Stitcher, Spreaker, YouTube, etc., as all of our productions are. Let me get to the, well, very quickly here. Jackie Robinson, number 42, will be honored on later today as they break out. He broke the Calabaria on the 15th of April, 1947. And there was another player that also broke the barrier on January 31st, 1919. First African-American player to play regularly in the big leagues wasn't the Brooklyn Dodger. Second baseman, it was Moses Fleetwood, the Fleet. Moses Fleetwood Walker. On May the 1st, May Day 18, that was before May Day 1884, 26-year-old Walker was a catcher for the Toledo Blue Stockings in their opening game in the then Major League American Association. 6 decades later, 60 years, while Robinson was hailed as a pioneer, Walker was seen as more of a curiosity. Before a June game against the Washington Nationals, the Washington Post noted that Toledo catcher is a colored man, and no doubt many will attend the game to see our colored brother in a new role. After Toledo won, the Post reported that Walker played in fine style, catching the starting pitcher Tony Mullane. Like many of Walker's European teammates, Mullane respected the bare-handed catcher as a player, but not as an equal. Walker was the best catcher I worked with, Mullane said years later, but I dislike Negroes. Whenever I have to pitch to him, I pitch everything I want without looking at his signals. Everything I want to pitch anyway. Walker's first gained national attention playing for Oberlin College in Ohio, then the University of Michigan, where he studied law. In 1883, the Toledo team recruited him to play the new in the new Northwest League, a minor league. The club was in Peoria, Illinois. Used to have the old adage, it won't play in Peoria. Tried to ban Walker, but demanded, met with disapproach. But it was were drawn, and one newspaper reported the personable Walker was popular with many of the European sports writers, as they call white. The Sporting News later described him as an avid reader of high grade literature and a brilliant conversationalist. But Walker faced discrimination on and off the field in Fort Wayne, Indiana, the hometown of Buttigieg. A local newspaper reported a head waiter at least one restaurant refused to seat Walker, who was said to be well paid. Walker, the paper said, received more money in a week than the big head waiter in 6 months, and is far more advanced mentally of the white man, and the waiter was fired. Walker was never a great player, but he was described as a plucky catcher, a hard hitter, and darling and success base runner. He led Toledo to the Northwestern League pennant in 1883. The next season, Toledo joined the American Association, which added 4 teams, including the Washington Nationals and the forerunners of the Brooklyn Dodgers. Walker hit a solid .263 in 1884, but played only 42 games because of a rib injury. Weldy also played a few games in the outfield. Walker often faced racial taunts from fans, as Robinson later would. Before a trip to play in Richmond, the Toledo manager received a letter. We, the undersigned, do hereby warn you not to put up Walker, the Negro catcher, the evening you play in Richmond, as we could mention the name of 75 determined men who have sworn to mob Walker if he comes on the grounds in a suit. We hope that you will listen to our words of warning, so that there will be no trouble. But if you do not, there certainly will be. We only write this to prevent much bloodshed, as you alone can prevent. Walker didn't play. Toledo cut Walker from the team after the 1884 season. This was roughly about 20 years after the Civil War. He never played in another Major League Baseball game, but he continued to play in the minor league at Newark in the top level in the National League. A sports writer wrote a poem about him. There's a catcher named Walker who behind the plate is a croaker. He throws to a base and with ease and grace, and steals round the bags like a stalker. A teammate of the Newark Little Giants was an African-American pitcher named George Stobie, I suppose, who in 1886 led in the National League with 35 wins. By 1887, the 12-team league had 7 African-American players, including the Buffalo star Frank Gant, who wore wooden shin guards. But Chicago star player Aaron Cap Anson, a well-known racist, refused to let the team play if Newark's black players did, so Walker and Storby were benched for the game. That has happened a lot in those days. The next day, the International League owners voted to ban the signing of any new African players. Those already on contract were allowed to continue. The unwritten rule barring African American players until Jackie Robinson. He was at a farm club in Montreal. In his final year in 1889, let's see, who was this? Played for Syracuse. Walker was the lone black player left in the International League. He had always led a lonely life. He often slept on park benches and railroad stations. because hotels refused to allow him to stay with the European players. David Zant, in his book Fleet Walker Divided Heart, in Toronto, Walker was caught with a loaded gun after threatening to shoot a taunting fan. In 1891, after he left baseball, Walker was charged with second-degree murder in Syracuse for fatally stabbing one of several white men who accosted him on a city street. An all-white jury acquitted him. Walker returned to his home state of Ohio, where he owned a cinema with his second wife. Walker life led him embittered about racial relations in America. In 1908, he wrote a book, Our Home Colony, that advanced the separation of races. By contrast, Robinson was a leader for racial integration. He left Brooklyn to lead to six national pennants, won one World Series championship, and in 1962 he was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. After retiring, he became a leader in the civil rights movement, died of a heart attack at a very young age of 53 in 1972. Walker died at the age of 67 in 1924, was unacknowledged by European America. He remained a historic footnote to this day, and I'm glad we got him in here. Let's quickly sedge away here to Tiger Woods. Most people heard about Tiger. Tiger won the Masters. Period. On Sunday, longer players in the 1986 Masters was won by 46-year-old Jack Nicholson, who is now retired. His sixth green jacket. Tiger has 5 now. And it was surreal. This is from the ESPN. His daughters Sam and Charlie were there at the carousel last summer when their father now he had also despite spinal fusion surgery has saved his career. Blew his Sunday lead at the Open Championship and lost his man-to-man duel with Francisco Molinari. Anyway, so Tiger has had some ups and downs, no doubt about it. He had back surgery, number of back surgeries. He had his driving problems, the problems with his wife, etc. Tremendous pain he was in. In fact, he was at a Masters dinner 2 years ago, and he had to have pain blockers there, and he had a hard time even walking the course. So that's the story of Tiger Woods. Basically, what it says: if you persevere, you can overcome many things. And he won his first Masters since 2005. That would have been 14 years ago. Long time. Usually most people don't repeat after a hiatus of that juncture. Let's do the Major League Baseball scores from Sunday. Red Sox shut out the Orioles 4-0 at the Green Monster. The White Sox 5-2 over the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. The Rays 8-4 over the Blue Jays. And in 14, the Phillies 3-1 over the Marlins. The Pirates are 4-3 over the Nationals in D.C. The Twins beat the Tigers 6-4. The Royals are carrying on their winning ways 9-8 over Cleveland. The Rangers win 8-7 over Oakland in Texas. The Cardinals 9-5 over the Reds. And the Rockies 4-0. Shut out the Giants. Dodgers 7-1. And I tuned into that game over the Brewers, which is a very good team. The line score there, the Dodgers had 11 hits, no errors, and the Brewers just simply didn't hit 4 hits. The D-backs win 8-4 over the Padres in Arizona. The Astros 3-2 over the Mariners out in Seattle. Atlanta 7-3 over the Mets. And the Cubs, Angels, were postponed. On to the NBA, which has started the playoff run. The Celtics won 84-74 over the Pacers. Trailblazers 104-99 over the Thunder. The Bucks 121-86, and finally the Rockets 122-90. To the NHL, which has their own playoff situation going. The Islanders 4-1 over the Penguins, and let's see. They have taken a 3-zip lead in the series. They, the Islanders. The Blue Jackets 3-1 over the Lightning. The Blue Jackets move to the brink of sweeping the series. Anyway, the Blues, the Jets, Winnipeg Jets, 6-3. The Jets bounce back with the 6-3 win. They've even win over the Blues. And finally, the Golden Knights of Las Vegas and the Sharks. Golden Knights 6-3. There, so these series are moving on in Major League Hockey. Let me just make sure I didn't. And we got the New York Times Bernie story. I think we also got the we got the Bernie Trump voters, and make sure that was from there. And we an African American student went looking for free food. He ended up pinned down by campus police. It was 11:30 on Thursday p.m. The Columbia University senior was had just left his late night African beat dance practice. He had work to do, and his anthropology thesis was looming. So the 23-year-old pulled out his phone to check a Facebook page where students can post and find the most reasonable staples on the American campus, free food. Other students had just deposited party leftovers at nearby Barnard College Library, where Columbia students are welcome to study. By the end of the night, he found himself in the latest chapter of another viral video. His quest for free food, McNabb had an encounter with the police, which included a disagreement about his student ID, that led to officers to pin him down on a countertop, an incident filmed by 2 witnesses. Inspired a weekend of unrest on the campus in New York City. McNabb said he wanted to do was work and study this weekend, and had instead spent the past 3 days fielding interviews, questions, etc. He was stopped by the Barnard officers and asked to show his ID. Encounters, he said, were a result of racial profiling. They once demanded to see his ID as he was leaving a 2-hour dance presses. Another time he left dance presses to run barefooted to the bathroom. He was stopped again because officers assumed he was homeless. This is terrible. Let me just finish this up here. Very long article. Administrators from Columbia have since released their own statement, and several of McNabb's anthropology professors have reached out in support. A woman he danced with in Brooklyn, who worked for the NAACP, texted him. The student newspaper, which he is an occasional contributor, is allowing him to write a personal essay about what happened. There was his job as a tutor, a paper for one class, a couple of articles for the student publication, and there was a protest spurred by his experience on Thursday night. So he has a lot of, Mr. McNabb has a lot of things to write about, including his thesis. This will do it for the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 15th of April, 2019. It's tax day, and incidentally, there's a bill going through Congress that bipartisan. What it would do is restrict the IRS from having its own tax return site. Now those sites are available free to people with low income from TurboTax, etc. They can file for free, and they try to upsell people there. But this would let the IRS, as in most industrial capitalist countries, have a site, and you could just simply go to it, and the information would be there, and you could file your return. Period. But the TurboTaxes of the world have been trying to block it, and they are attempting to do it. John Lewis is who I was thinking of. We'll have more on this. I didn't have an opportunity to get the whole story, and we're still working on the Justine Ruzak Damone trial out in the Midwest. We had last week, and we were going to make that report. We'll hopefully make it later today or early or in the evening. That report up to date there. We also have the black hole. We hadn't got it out yet, so we are a little behind, in a hole, as some would say. Have a good week, everyone. Boston Red from the Jerry Pippin Broadcast Booth. Good day.